Dane Miller, co-founder of Biomet. Thank you so much for joining us on this Nightingale Conan audio program that's going to be coming out in January or February of 2012. And also for your participation in the book, How They Did It, $1 Billion Insights from the Heart of America. And we're also just so thrilled that you'll be with us in Chicago for the Great Lakes Entrepreneurial Bash on November 17th.
It should be a lot of fun.
Oh.
I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask you a couple follow-up questions since the book came out, because we had such an incredible response. And one of the things that we had to ask you just a little more about was the titanium. You know, there was the perfect storm in Indiana. It knocked out all the power. You went to your surgeon friend who inserted the titanium in your arm. That speaks to a level of dedication that's incredible. I'm just wondering if you can tell us a little more about that, because people hear that story and they're just like, he did what? Kind of amazing.
Well, I was a real believer in titanium and always felt that it had lots of attributes that made it especially good for implant fabrication. We were not the first company to use that particular alloy, but the first company to pioneer its application. There was a small company in the UK that was using titanium for trauma products, fixation products. And I felt, looking at lots and lots of animal work, some of which I'd been involved in, that it was time to jump ahead of the game and put a piece in a human being. And I couldn't think of a better guinea pig than myself.
And you didn't initially tell your any customers, any folks in the industry. You only told your daughters?
My daughters and my wife. Well, I didn't tell them until I got home.
Till you got home, which is why
Correct.
Your wife was not so pleased with you.
She was not pleased at all with the bandage on my arm.
But you know, we're actually getting onto a serious subject, which is, for an entrepreneur, I think there's an absolute need that your spouse be on board with what an entrepreneur wants to do, being in business.
She was okay after thinking about it. She would have probably done all she could to stop me. But after I explained, I'm not going to die of cancer anytime soon, and it really is an extremely biocompatible material, and this was just a little fun experiment, she was okay. And then for about the next 9 years, our daughters used to bring their friends in and say, hey Dad, can we show them the titanium? You can actually feel it in there.
As long as you're showing the titanium off, perhaps for a moment we're going to get a close-up shot of titanium. This is famous.
Well, what you're going to get a close shot of, there was no scar there after the titanium was implanted, nothing at all. Later we came back in when it seemed like the right time to remove the titanium and used an experimental product called DermaZip, a wound closure device. That's the DermaZip, which became known as DermaScar and never made it to market.
Have you ever, DermaScar, it's not coming to market. Don't look in your neighborhood Walgreens for it. Have you heard of another entrepreneur who went to those lengths to show dedication to their product?
Oh, I'm sure lots of entrepreneurs have tried their products themselves. Not very many of them tried the products in themselves. But I'm sure I'm not alone there. With the exception of the fact that my body was actually opened up to put it in there.
So what do I want to talk a little bit? Let's talk a little bit about team building and how to build a management team and a core. We won't call them employees. We'll call them team members. There were some wonderful examples from the book. For example, at Biomet, making most of the employees into equity owners. And any more thoughts on how you go about developing that great team? For example, how does a manager, an entrepreneur, look towards hiring to find that great person?
Well, in my opinion, one of the magic sentences when you're interviewing a prospective team member is, I've always wanted to work at Biomet. That usually softens me up pretty good.
And if they really mean it, that there's that dedication to be there.
You know it the first day.
Right.
I think there are three components. First, you've got to identify and hire the right people. Second, you've got to create an environment where they can do their best work without the interference of their manager or the environment. And probably the worst four-letter word around Biomet and in my entire career is politics. I worked very, very hard for 28 and a half years to maintain an environment where politics was not a way of life. Politics didn't seep into the organization, and I'm sure it did in some places, but if it ever got to me, I nipped it in the bud pretty quick.
And that's with how many total people on the team?
When I left in 2006, we had a total of about 8,000 people. Today, including the sales force, it's about 10.
I think it's also incredible that you have had this wonderful track record with Biomet over a number of years, and yet you faced your biggest challenge after you had clearly established your credentials for company building and building billions of dollars in value, and yet the challenge still hit you. I think that could be inspiring for young entrepreneurs to talk about that. I think people think it only occurs in the beginning, and once you've arrived and that's it. And yet you faced a challenge from some of your board members.
That's correct, and I guess I've looked at my life, and that wasn't the only humbling experience in my past. Probably the toughest and most memorable at this point in my life. But an entrepreneur or anybody who goes through life thinking they'll never have a humbling experience aren't ready for it when it comes, because that's part of life. You don't realize how good it is until you once in a while experience how bad it can be.
Well, congratulations to you, Dane, and thank you so much. You were an inspiration.
Can I just provide a little extra sense of humbling experiences?
Yes.
When some people go through a humbling experience, they go hide in the closet. They just leave life. I think just the opposite can happen. If you learn from the humbling experience, if you really let it redeem and strengthen you, it can actually be a beneficial event in your life. You learn how to avoid the kinds of circumstances that lead you back into such an experience.
Makes you a stronger person.
It can make you a stronger person. Don't let it make you weaker.
Thank you, Dane.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure. Really great.